conversation first and foremost to uplift the leadership and the bravery of the survivors who came forward. If it were not for the sisterhood that has been formed amongst all of us over all of these years. And so first I start there by naming and uplifting the sisterhood and by drawing on that strength today. It is my greatest honor to be able to be here with my sisters to be in conversation about this matter. Today with us, we have Ashley Judd, activist, leader, actor, and silence breaker. We also have Tarana Burke, founder of the MeToo movement, and Fatima Goss, CEO of the National Women's Law Center. I'm now going to open the conversation with Ashley, and each of us in turn will share remarks with you, and at the close, we will stay behind for a few moments to answer some questions. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming. It was short notice, and I have learned that we can pretend to care, but we can't pretend to show up. So thank you for showing up. First and foremost, I want to say that I stand in sisterhood and solidarity with all survivors of male sexual violence. And today is a day, like every day in American women's lives, when male sexual violence has intruded and disrupted our lives. There I am, planning to get my backcountry camping site reservations in Yellowstone National Park, for which I'm very excited. And I get the news from Jody Cantor of the New York Times that 4 judges at New York's court have voted to overturn Harvey Weinstein's sexual crimes conviction. This is what it's like to be a woman in America, living with male entitlement to our bodies. Now, for those of you who don't know, when I was an up-and-coming actor in Hollywood in the 1990s, I'd been up all night filming on the movie Kiss the Girls, and I had a breakfast appointment with Harvey Weinstein at the Peninsula Hotel. He, of course, was the mega producer, co-founder of Miramax Studios, who was an extraordinary gatekeeper. His movies won Oscars, they were box office successes, and he was a real tastemaker. And so this appointment was a really huge opportunity for my burgeoning career. And when I showed up at the Peninsula Hotel at which I often stayed with my family, and I knew both the concierge, we went to acting school together, and the desk staff, I said, "Is Mr. Weinstein in the Belvedere, the restaurant, or is he on the patio?" And they said, "Oh no, he's in his room." I was so naive. I thought, room service is going to take a really long time and I'm hungry. So they sent me, complicitous, the ecosystem. Not all men are violent, but most men are silent about other men's violence, up to his room, where Harvey, wearing his hotel robe, immediately began asking if he could give me a massage, and this progressed into him insisting that I watch him take a shower, and other acts of sexual harassment and aggression. I was lucky I got out of that hotel room. And my dad was with me that day. He was waiting for me in the hotel lobby. And he still says that when I came down, he could tell something devastating had just happened. I told anyone who would listen. The director on Kiss the Girls, Gary Fleeter, the screenplay writer who said there was no Attorney General of Hollywood done to whom to report this incident. But finally, of course, Jody Cantor and Megan Twohey of the New York Times came to me through Nicholas Kristof, and I went on the record telling that story, because when survivors tell their stories, they are exercising a powerful form of leadership that sparks others to join in shared action that catalyzes change. And we understand that leadership is exercising principles and values in the face of uncertainty. And that's what we leaders and survivors do. This today is an act of institutional betrayal. And our institutions betray survivors of male sexual violence. And we need to work within and without the systems to start having what is known as institutional courage. And you can learn more about institutional courage by looking that up. There's actually a center for it housed at Stanford University. It's based on research, it's informed by data, and these are concrete practices and actions that our institutions can take to respond to workplace harassment and male sexual violence in ways that both prevent, address, and have postvention to make sure that women and all people work in environments that are free from harassment and sexual violence, because we have so much to offer. We need to be able to contribute without fear, without terror of violence, of our voices being muted, our contributions being diminished, without fear of retaliation. And you know what the great poignancy is of this day, why I'm in New York City? I don't live here. I am here to be at the United Nations to advocate for Convention 190, the convention to eliminate all forms of harassment and male sexual violence in the world of work. God is interesting. And we say the world of work because harassment and sexual violence take place in a variety of settings. I wasn't on a movie set. I've been sexually harassed on many a movie set. But I was at a hotel, which was off-site. In the convention's wisdom, we use the term world of work to expand the places where this harassment and sexual violence can take place. So I want you to remember that expression, the world of work. I stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have bloody knees, because male sexual violence may knock us down, but we get right back up. And together we are in this struggle for freedom from male entitlement to our bodies. Thank you. Oh, do I get to introduce the next powerful woman? Who's going next? Oh, God. The one and only Tarana Burke. So Tarana is the founder of MeToo movement. And if you haven't had a chance to read her book, I highly encourage you to do so. She is a woman who, in the South, chose to work with girls of color who had experienced childhood sexual abuse. And in this one particularly both devastating and inspirational story, there was a girl at a Black girls leadership camp that she was leading. It was actually boys and girls, who was, kind of hard to respond to. And Tarana got into this relationship with this girl and wished that she had been able just to say to her, "Me too," which is how she birthed the expression. And so that's just a small anecdote. And of course, the Me Too movement website, if you've never had a chance to look at it, is full of resources for anyone who has experienced male sexual violence, knows someone who has, or thinks they know someone who has. It's a powerful tool filled with support and advocacy, so please check it out if you haven't. And it is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce my sister, Tarana Burke.
Oh, Ashley, thank you. And it's almost hard to come up and speak after you. I'm so moved. My name is Tarana Burke. I am also a survivor and founder and leader, and want to first say thank you to all of my fellow survivors and leaders in the room. As you obviously know, we pulled this together very quickly because we thought it important to be very vocal, swiftly, in this moment. We are devastated for the survivors who are connected to this case and the survivors who had found some solace and catharsis in the original verdict around Harvey Weinstein. Many people, many survivors, and those who love and support survivors probably thought that that original verdict meant that there was going to be a change, that it marked a change, it marked a difference in how this justice system was going to move and operate. And I think that we felt, and a lot of us felt, that we were on a road to seeing a different America. And this moment makes it feel like we were wrong. Inevitably, there will be headlines in the coming days and weeks talking about what this means for the Me Too movement. We've seen this happen over and over again. There is a court case that comes out and says, Cosby has been released and the Me Too movement is over. And then there's another court case that says E. Jean Carroll has won. And they say the Me Too movement is back. And so I want to be clear that this moment and this decision actually means that we have a movement. It means we have a movement. 10 years ago, we could not get a man like Harvey Weinstein into a courtroom. And you need to be clear about that. A man as powerful and as far-reaching as a Harvey Weinstein, as Ashley just described, you could not get him into a courtroom. And we need to acknowledge that. We also need to understand that the legal system has never served survivors in this country. Carceral solutions won't save us. And we need to understand that. Rape and sexual assault have the lowest arrest and conviction rates for a reason. So we are clear that moments like this underscore why movements are necessary. And we have a movement. This is why the work has to keep happening, why we keep going. Almost 7 years ago, because these brave women in this case broke their silence, millions and millions and millions of others found the strength to come forward and do the same. That will always be the victory. This doesn't change that. And the people who abuse their power and privilege to violate and harm others will always be the villains. This doesn't change that. We have spent decades building a survivor justice movement. Well before 2017, well before MeToo went viral. We have spent decades building this movement. 7 years ago, we got big momentum when the hashtag went viral. There have always been ups and downs. There have always been changes. There have always been moments where we had the Anita Hill moment, right? We ride the wave when we have big moments, and when we have low moments, we get low and we get dirty and we do what we have to do. We get in the trenches and we do our work, and we will continue to do that. The outcome of this case doesn't change that. We also stand with resolve and resilience. We will always stand with resolve and resilience. I really want to reiterate over and over again, because I am preparing myself for the onslaught of what does this mean for the Me Too movement? What does this mean for the Me Too movement? I know you're going to say it regardless. No matter what I say in this moment, I know they're going to come regardless. And so I want you to hear this. This is not a blow to the movement. It is a clarion call. And we are prepared to answer that call. Thank you. Oh, wait, let me do my intro. Coming up next is my sister, Fatima Goss, head of the National Women's Law Center, who is a stalwart in this movement. And she will have remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarana. And first, thank you, Monica. It is special that we are all here today for C-190. That's why we are all gathered. But it does feel more than a little special that we're here. I'm Fatima Goss. I'm president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, and I'm also a co-founder of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which the National Women's Law Center runs. We founded it in 2018, just 4 months after the New York Times broke the story of Harvey Weinstein's decades-long abuse. I want to begin with deep gratitude to Ashley and to all silence breakers. I'm not sure people understand what it is like to have to share your experience and not know how it will be received by the public or by our courts, which often fail us. And my thought to them today is to remind them that they are now not alone. There are advocates around this country, in and out of institutions, who have been guided by them and following them and holding them up, whether they know it or not. And that included folks on this jury that heard their hearing counts of abuse in 2019 and believed them. And so did millions of people around this country who were not in that courtroom. So I don't think those folks feel bound in their beliefs by the decision. And today's decision does not erase the truth of what happened. It doesn't alter the reality that Weinstein is a serial sexual abuser who exploited his power for decades. It doesn't alter the reality that he has now also been convicted in 2022 in Los Angeles and is sentenced to 16 years in prison there. And so I want to name for all the people who are quick to jump as the great Tarana Burke name to make assessments about the power and the reach of this movement. It is a reminder to me today that survivors who often still are in the margins with fine print and loopholes getting in the way of what looks like justice and healing for them, it's a reminder that sexual harassment and abuse remains pervasive and that people who come forward, they often experience retaliation. And they know that is built in, and they come forward anyway. It is a reminder that harassment and abuse happens across industries, across this country, across this globe. And it is a reminder that survivors who speak up must be shielded. Yes. They must be shielded from this retaliation. They must be shielded from laws that don't serve them. We must have time periods that are extended so that people could come forward on their terms and when they're ready. We have to confine the reach of non-disclosure agreements that have gotten in the way and that have meant that so many people were silenced for far too long. But the most important reminder, I think, for me today is that one well-known case does not define this movement. Mm-hmm. The strength of survivors who in this room, and I count myself among them, the ones I meet and get to hear from and work with and work alongside every single day, we are a force. We are already winning, no matter the setbacks. And we will always be greater than those who seek to control us. Thank you.
So I think most of you in the room know we had something like an hour to pull this gathering together, and I didn't have any time to prepare remarks, and we were all gathering ourselves. But I think that speaks to the moment, because we cannot be prepared for something like what the news that we received today. And much to Ashley's point, it is in these moments when we are kind of caught off guard, when we receive unexpected news that we thought we would never wanted to hear, that we have to decide, what do we do with it? And where do we go with it? And I'm so grateful for these sisters and for all of you, because where we go is to community. We find each other. And that is what I hope that in this moment, as survivors and allies and people around the world learn of this news, let us find each other and make a renewed commitment to do the work that is required, not to take on a case like this one and to look at the results of this opinion, but let us do the work to take on what is required to end sexual violence in every workplace and in every place today and forever. That is what we have to focus on, is the way forward and the way that we're going to finally end this problem, and along the way provide the supports that are needed to those of us who survive every single day. And, I came into community with Ashley and with Tarana, and Fatima and I were already in community. We got closer because I wrote the letter, the Dear Sisters letter, on behalf of the 700,000 farm worker women who heard the stories, who heard Ashley and who heard others who were sharing their truths and their pain And in that moment, as society was responding and reacting and people were making judgment calls and decisions, in my community, the farm worker community, we were able to listen, to take it into our hearts and to say that what is needed right now is for us to say, we see you, we hear you, we love you, and we will be with you. And that is the call today. To all the survivors who have come forward, who have received this news today, we love you, we see you, we believe you, and we will continue to be with you. And to all of the survivors who are watching this press conference or who might hear about the press conference after today, know that we will be with you along this journey and that none of us here are going to stop until we are all free and safe. And as we walk across the street to the United Nations for the event that was planned and is planned for today on the upcoming anniversary of Convention 190, declaring that the world of work be free of gender-based violence and harassment, this is our opportunity to show the world that we mean it and that we will make sure that every single person, every working person will be able to work with dignity and free of violence, and that our movement isn't just about the world of work, but it is about every place. And we call you to join us as we continue to grow and fortify this movement. Thank you. And we are going to stay for a few moments to take some questions. We do have to go to the United Nations for an event, but we will stay for a few moments to take questions. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. If you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Go ahead.
Are you concerned that today's decision in New York may affect Weinstein's conviction in Los Angeles?
What's your outlet, please?
Sorry, Reuters.
Well, the first thing to know is that California isn't governed by a New York appellate decision. But the second thing that I want to just say, and for folks, I encourage you to take the time to read the decision, including the really powerful dissent. I think this court got it wrong. It was a 4-3 decision for a reason. And the way that our laws have developed over the last couple of decades, the majority opinion doesn't really take that into account. There was a pattern of behavior, so it was not unusual to have the sorts of witnesses that were involved in this trial. And so the short version of this is, I deeply hope that is not the case and that the California appellate courts would not go the wrong way in the same way that this New York court has gone.
Also a question for Fatima.
Could you-
Hoping for New York 1. If you wouldn't mind going to the mic as well. Sorry. Wondering, regarding New York's laws, what can the state legislature do? Do you think that there's movement, or there should be movement by the legislature? Should a new statute be created? Obviously, because this, or from those that I've spoken to, say it's because New York's law is very narrow. So can you talk a little bit about that? And whether or not you will be appealing the state legislature for a change there?
So first, I think most people are going to be wondering whether the district attorney will actually continue to move forward in that, and it sounds like they haven't made that decision yet under existing law. And I really encourage people to sort of take a beat and think about whether or not this was a misapplication or whether or not there is a problem actually with New York laws. But the thing that I will say about it is that over the last decades, it has been pretty clear that it has taken time for courts to understand the nature of sexual violence. The old myths and ideas that people have that most sexual violence is some sort of stranger rape in an alley, right, versus what is far more likely. It seems to me that there is a lot of work to be done to also educate the judges in our courts so that they understand when the cases come before them, what sexual violence actually looks like, so that survivors are treated with dignity and respect in their courtrooms, and so that their stories are considered and taken into account.
Are there any other questions?
Hi.
Your name and outlet?
Yes, Aisha, co-founder and co-executive director of Feminist, and our audience really requires and desires a lot of action. So my question to you all is, what would you say would be some calls to action right now?
Yeah, I think this is a great time when we say that this is not a moment to say that the Me Too movement is dead and things like that. This is a moment for people to join in that, right? I think one of the biggest sort of missteps that we've made is people sit on the sidelines and watch. Like this is a spectator sport. Movements aren't spectator sports. So movements are made of people. So if people want to be active, this is the time to stand up and say, I'm a part of this. The movement is what we say it is. So a call to action is this is the moment for survivors, people who stand by survivors, advocates. If we believe that we can live in a world free of sexual violence, this is the moment to stand up and say, we define the movement. This case doesn't define the movement. This is when I say it's a clarion call, that's what I mean. So the call to action is for people to stand up and say, this is why we need a movement. The movement is made up of us. We are the people of the movement, right? So I think over the last 6.5, 7 years, people have been watching and saying, oh, let's see what happened with the movement next. And I was going to say open a newspaper, but I guess not. they get online. I'm old. So they get online and they scroll to see what's happening next. And no, what happens next is what we say happens next. So that's what the call to action is. What are we going to do next? And so our job is to put guardrails on, but the job of the people is to stand up and say, we are here and we are ready. Put our feet to the ground and to follow. And we are here to set up lots of things to do, right? This is a movement that is going to be long. That's what movements are. They're long, they're strategic, they're thoughtful, but there are lots of people. And the thing about survivors is, the sad thing about survivors, there's so many of us, but the good thing about survivors is there are so many of us. Every 68 seconds, but there are so many of us. So that's what I would say.
I also want to name that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the United States, and every April we call on people to get to know the rape crisis centers in their localities, to know who the anti-sexual violence coalitions are, to volunteer with them, to support them, to share their work, to donate to them. This is the time to do that, to do it over and over again. There are going to be survivors who are going to hear the news from today, and they're going to be shook. And we need to say, we are strong and we're in this together. We need to say that over and over again. We also need to call on our political leaders, because the law fails us. The law consistently and continuously fails us, and legal reform is required. So we have to make sure that we are pushing on all the levers that we have. We need to say it's law reform, it's judicial reform, it's who are our leaders, how are they supporting survivors. We need to support the movement by donating and funding the movement. But the other thing is, in this moment, I call on you to lift up the voices and the stories of the brave individuals who came forward to name the harm that was committed against them by Harvey Weinstein. They are the names that we should be lifting up. It is their brave stories that we should be lifting up, and their courage. Let their names and their stories be the loudest ones heard right now.
I really validate what my sisters have shared, and would just add a couple of things that folks can look at and watch. The language that we use matters, and it's been very helpful for me to reflect on and interrogate what I say and how I say it. And I credit Jackson Katz, who's a masculinity scholar, with challenging me in this department. So, for example, I would say, she was raped, or I was raped, and he would say, a man raped you. From whence does this violence come? And did I have the courage to be someone who was willing to hold a violent man accountable for his male sexual violence? It's uncomfortable. And I have started to do that. And so Jackson Katz has a TED Talk. I would ask everyone to watch it, where he literally does a little diagramming, just like in 6th grade English, on a whiteboard, and shows how we make the woman responsible for this act of male sexual aggression against her. And then Misrepresentation is doing a weekly podcast at the moment on healthy masculinities. Ted Bunch, A Call to Men. How can men modify their behavior so that they don't become perpetrators? Because we invite them to grow with us as we heal. And also, we have to look at the role of violent misogynistic pornography in this. And everyone should take a look at Culture Reframed, which was founded by Dr. Gail Dines, who's a very courageous pornography scholar. And look at the article that Peggy Orenstein just published in the New York Times about how what we call choking, but is really strangulation and asphyxiation, has migrated from pornography into teen sex. So these things all play a role in male sexual violence. 1 out of 3 college women in their last sexual experience, not over their careers, were asphyxiated by their male partner. And this has become so normalized that we don't interrogate it. And so check out these resources and know that this is no longer the up with which we are willing to put. Thank you.
I just want to offer a couple of additional calls to action, because I really appreciate that question. The one I want to say, we run the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. I am really clear that every time something happens, really good or bad, that we hear from more and more survivors. So that reminds me that they're not deterred by any single case, but it also reminds me that it is our job to meet that need. So for survivors who are looking for legal support, I hope they will find us at the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. The second thing is there are a range of policy forms that would make a difference right now in the world of work. And there is a bill in Congress called the Be Heard bill that would make a huge difference for survivors, so that no matter where you work, no matter what your job, you were covered, so that many of the practices that make it easier for employers to look the other way rather than solve the problem of violence would be stopped. And so I hope people will take a look at that bill and call on their policymakers to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last thing, and we are going to wrap up so we can get both to the UN. For any survivors out there, MeToo International, our organization, has on our website Survivor Sanctuary. So the one thing we know in moments like this, survivors will be triggered. Across the country, across the world, this is not going to be a great day for survivors who are waking up to this news. All of our phones have been going off all morning. So on our website, MeTooMVMT.org, there is Survivor Sanctuary. It is a self-guided tool that the survivors can use to take yourself through some healing practices. We encourage survivors to find healing support. There's also a healing resource library, but we encourage you today to be gentle with yourself. This is another call to action, if you will, for survivors to be gentle with yourself today. Turn off the news. Get off of social media. Don't go down the rabbit hole if you can, because we don't deserve this. We need to lay this burden down at the feet of where it belongs. It's not our burden to carry. So if we're going to give a last call to action, I urge survivors to take care of yourself today, because it's not easy to have this, put in our faces when we don't ask for it. So, there are lots of resources on our site if you're looking for them. But even if you're not, if you can just move away from this news today, we encourage you to do that. So thank you all for coming out. Monica, if you don't have some last words here, we appreciate you.
Thank you all, and if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out. We'll make sure that they get directed to the right folks, and we'll be happy to share responses. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, of course.